First, that poll out of New Hampshire. According to the first Quinnipiac University poll in the state, former Vice President Joe Biden narrowly leads with 20% support. Senator Elizabeth Warren is at 16%, Mayor Pete Buttigieg is at 15%, and Senator Bernie Sanders has 14% support. Joe, this is reflective of the Q poll we saw actually last week in the state of Iowa, where you had this cluster. The order was a little different, obviously. Joe Biden was down in fourth in that state. But all within this group of four, all within 4 or 5 points of each other in New Hampshire, just like they were in Iowa last week.
You know, there's so many things to look at there, Willie. First of all, Joe Biden doesn't look quite so weak, sitting at 20% atop the field in New Hampshire. We had seen some polls that had Elizabeth Warren going past. But, you know, several things stand out. Please excuse me. Several things stand out there. One, Joe Biden has sort of maintained his footing. Two, Elizabeth Warren had an upward arc that really, she was moving forward. She's run a great campaign. Again, really done all of the blocking and tackling right that you'd want in this campaign. But right now, that momentum, at least for now, seems to have hit a ceiling. And then you've got Mayor Pete in third place. Right there. He's right there in Iowa. Mayor Pete's right there in New Hampshire. Suddenly, well, a lot of things happening here. It is just an absolute free-for-all. That seems to be very good news for Mayor Pete. It also seems to be, at least for today, good news for Joe Biden that at least in this one poll, he is maintaining a lead, even though it's a very small lead.
Yeah, so, Eddie, I would ask you, like the Iowa poll, there's a huge group of voters in New Hampshire who have not made up their minds, which you'd expect at this point. 61% say they could change their minds based on the answer they gave to that question, which leaves room for people to obviously shape the minds of voters, but also people who, like Pete Buttigieg, who the country in those states don't know as well, to introduce themselves and make some more moves there. But when you look at that cluster at the top, Elizabeth Warren is sitting within the margin of error. Bernie Sanders, obviously well known up there in New Hampshire. What do you see in those poll numbers?
You know, actually, when I look at those poll numbers, I kind of make the distinction, not so much around individual candidates, but the debate, the fissure that's happening within the party. So you see Biden and Buttigieg, you combine their numbers, and then when you combine Sanders and Warren's numbers, you see the split that's in the party. You see the divide, the debate. Where do we go? How do we reach for something, a much more radical change, a much more populist move, or do we double down on what we've had before? That debate, to my mind, is evident in those numbers. And the fact that 61% of New Hampshire voters are undecided suggests to me that they're trying to make a decision where they're going to fall in that divide.
And they've got a bunch of time to make that decision. Meanwhile, more than half of New Hampshire's Democratic primary voters say they would not consider backing Mayor Mike Bloomberg if he were to run. 54%, according to the latest Quinnipiac poll. 37% said they would consider voting for him. Just 2% say, I would definitely vote for him. Mayor Bloomberg also the second choice among 9% of Biden voters, 2% of Buttigieg supporters, 1% of Warren's, and none of Sanders' New Hampshire voters. So you have some evidence there, guys, why Mayor Bloomberg has said he's going to sort of skip those first 4 states with eyes on Super Tuesday.
Well, and Steve Ratner, of course, we need to let everybody know that when you're not managing Willie and my dog track earnings, and that is enough to keep any, and scratch off tickets. That's enough to keep any man busy or woman. That you're also managing on the side of our account, also managing Michael Bloomberg's money. And we're fine with that as long as it doesn't get in the way of your primary job with us. But, you know, you look at this data from New Hampshire, look at a lot of other data out there. And I don't know that, you know, the famous saying, what, in God we trust, all others provide data. That doesn't really apply to politics, does it? Michael Bloomberg's always looking for data. Data did not support Donald Trump's rise to the White House, and it hasn't supported other people's rise to the White House. Is there a chance that he may run this race, even if the numbers don't seem to support him up front?
Well, I do. Yes, you're right. Mike Bloomberg's one of Mike Bloomberg's many memorable phrases is "In God we trust, all others bring data." So it is certainly a different process for him to look at politics, which, while there's lots and lots of data, you can't really depend on it. And even if you did depend on it, so much can change. But remember, he's been through this 3 times before. He was elected mayor 3 times in New York, in the first case, certainly, with everybody saying this was impossible and this was crazy. So this is not his first rodeo when it comes to deciding whether to enter a political race without a lot of tangible support to say that his chances are very, very high. And of course, that's true of virtually everybody who enters a political race. Very few people enter with any real confidence or conviction that the data says that they have a hugely high percentage chance of winning.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.